Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and this is my review for The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett, which is a detective story from 1930. This is an absolute classic of American detective fiction, and I can't say that I didn't go into it without some preconceptions. Now, I don't consider myself a connoisseur of detective fiction in any way, and certainly not of detective fiction written by American authors. But even I had heard of Sam Spade, the detective at the center of this novel. He's commonly described as hard-boiled and morally grey and a massive misogynist. Needless to say, I was intrigued. I was also half expecting to hate this book based on everything I'd heard about it. I still decided to read it because I just can't resist a classic, and in particular not a genre-defying classic, and there is no denying that The Maltese Falcon is that. But guess what? I didn't hate it. I probably found it a lot more hilarious than the author had probably intended, but I really did enjoy reading this book. Right, this is the place in my book review videos where I try and summarize the book in a spoiler-free but still coherent way. However, this one's going to be a challenge because a lot happens in The Maltese Falcon, and for a lot of the book, we don't actually know what exactly is going on. We start with previously mentioned hard-boiled detective Sam Spade in the San Francisco office, which he shares with his partner Miles Archer, when a new client appears. A young woman who is desperately worried about the fate of her younger sister, who has run off with a dangerous scoundrel. As Sam very quickly finds out, this client isn't all she's made out to be, and instead of trying to convince a teenage girl to give up her boyfriend, he finds himself drawn into the dangerous, frantic and deadly hunt for a valuable historical artifact known as, you guessed it, the Maltese Falcon. Right, I hope that was both vague enough while still maybe telling you a little bit about the plot of this book. There is so much happening in this novel that you barely even have time to breathe. From the moment Sam is involved in this, he goes from crime scene to punch up, from seducing beautiful women to searching their apartments for clues. Poor lad does not get a break at all in this. The book is written in what I think of as an extremely cinematic style, meaning that external things like what people look like, what they sound like, what they're doing at any given moment in any given scene is described in minute detail. When Sam rolls a cigarette, you get a step-by-step description of it. When he punches a guy and knocks him out cold before he searches his pockets, you know exactly what's in those pockets. Every item of clothing, every detail of hair and eye color, every facial expression is described. It's very easy to picture everything while reading the book. What's not described at all is the protagonist's inner life, his inner monologue, his thoughts, his judgment, his suspicions. And that is, I think, what makes him so intriguing to many readers. But at no point do we actually know what's going on inside his head. Whether he trusts someone or not, what exactly he does or doesn't know. We're not privy to that information until he decides to disclose it to another character in the book. And because he's a crafty one, he lies. It does make for a somewhat tiring reading experience after a while. The reader is so kept in the dark about what's going on that some parts of the book are straight up confusing. There are so many conversations where you're not sure what the characters are actually talking about. It all becomes a lot easier once there's a bit of an explanation given about what the Maltese Falcon actually is and why everyone's after it. You know that misogyny I mentioned earlier? One of the things I knew about Sam Spade before reading it? Well, this character is such a glorious example of a male power fantasy that I can't even be mad at it. Sam Spade is built like a fridge, dressed like a gentleman. He has women swooning over him left, right and centre, but he keeps his cool, even when faced with the most seductive of them, the woman who's brought so many men to their knees. He drinks like a fish, he smokes like a chimney, but he's still ready to knock out the most dastardly villain with a well-aimed punch. He doesn't carry a gun, but he's very quick to disarm someone when threatened with one. He keeps his cool in every situation. He outwits both the criminals and the police on the regular. He sleeps around but still wins every woman's loyalty. You get the idea. He's so over the top that he's kind of fun to read about. I'm not well versed enough in the genre or familiar enough with Hammett's writing to really know whether this over-the-top portrayal of this hyper-masculine action hero is supposed to be overdrawn and silly and camp, or whether it's supposed to be taken at face value and very seriously. By the 6th or 7th time Sam Spade has come out of a punch-up with a split lip, only to have a gorgeous lady fuss over him, and then for him to dismiss her with a "don't you worry your pretty little head about it, sweetheart" kind of a line. It very much reads as caricature to me. And as that, I found it entertaining enough. Sam Spade is an absolute prick, and you're not entirely sure whether you want him to succeed throughout the book. It doesn't help that, as I've said before, we don't get any insight into his mind at all. We don't know where his priorities lie. We don't know what his moral compass is. We don't know whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. We're just witnesses to an absolutely mad week in this man's life. This is a very fast-paced book with a lot of things happening on a few pages. It's also very much a product of its time, both in the way it's written, the way the plot plays out, with some twists and turns that to us, who are now familiar with the genre of detective fiction, seem kind of predictable, but presumably weren't at the time. But it's also a product of its time with regards to character portrayals, in particular all three of the female characters, who are one variety of stereotype or another, as well as one of the antagonists, Joel Cairo, who's a whole bunch of stereotypes rolled into one. So with that in mind, do give The Maltese Falcon a read if, like me, you're intrigued by genre classics, by the books who made particular tropes popular, who maybe invented certain tropes, and who are in a way responsible for how genres are defined and written today. I entirely understand how The Maltese Falcon has become such a classic. It's an engaging read once you get used to the narrative style. It's an action-filled plot, quite unlike the more measured style of British detective fiction that I'm somewhat more familiar with. It's packed full of fist fights and stakeouts and verbal back and forth with police and with criminals and villains. It's got sex and murder and, of course, a good deal of mystery to guess along with. In a way, it's everything I expected this book to be, but it was more fun than I had thought I would have reading it. This video, by the way, is part of my 12 Decades of Christmas series, in which I review one book from each decade from the 1900s going up to the 2010s every day in the run-up to Christmas. This is the 4th video in that series, because this book was from the 1930s, only just, and tomorrow's video will be a review for a book from the 1940s. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!